The envelope was sitting on my kitchen table when I got home from work that Tuesday. My name was printed on it in the upper corner, clean and formal, like a bill or a court notice. Inside was a transfer agreement, 80% of Lawson Print and Supply, the business I had built from a single secondhand press in a rented garage over 30 years, transferred to a new LLC registered under the names Neil Lawson and Kayla Lawson. My son had sent it by email too. The note said it was for tax efficiency purposes. There was a signature line at the bottom with my name already typed underneath it. I set it down, put the kettle on, and stood at the window watching the neighbor's dog bark at nothing in the yard next door. My name is Gary Lawson. I'm 69 now, and I'm telling you this story with 7 years behind me. I want to be clear about something before I start. I'm not telling this story because I'm angry. I stopped being angry a long time ago. I'm telling it because I think some of you are sitting exactly where I was sitting that night, and you need to know what comes next. Go back 7 years. I was 62, a widower for 4 years, living alone in Denver in a house that was too quiet. My wife, Linda, had passed from cancer in the winter, and after that, I did what a lot of men my age do. I threw myself into work. The business kept me upright. It gave me somewhere to be every morning and a reason to keep the alarm set. Neil was 33 then, smart, confident, good with clients. He had come into the business 2 years before all this started, and I was glad to have him. I told myself I was planning for the future, giving him something real to inherit. What I was actually doing was handing a loaded gun to someone I had not finished testing. The first crack showed up at Thanksgiving. We had a disagreement at the table, nothing serious, just a difference of opinion about something I can't even fully remember now. But Kayla went quiet for the rest of the evening, and Neil spent the drive home smoothing things over with her instead of talking to me. Then came the phone call 4 days before Christmas. Dad, don't come Thursday. Kayla says it's just too complicated this year. I was still in my work boots when he called. I stood in the kitchen holding the phone and listening to my own son explain, in a tone he used for rescheduling meetings, that I was not welcome at Christmas dinner. Too complicated. 30 years of showing up, and that was the word he chose. I asked what that meant. He said something about the house being small and the holidays being stressful, and maybe next year would be better. I heard Kayla's voice in the background, impatient, asking him something. He said he had to go. I spent Christmas Eve at the Copperstone Grill, a steakhouse downtown that stays open on holidays because some people have nowhere else to be. The hostess gave me a table near the window. I ordered a ribeye and a bourbon and sat there watching families come and go, feeling like a man who had somehow become unnecessary to his own life. That's when Earl Grady walked over. He was tall, mid-60s, gray at the temples, wearing a green knit sweater that looked like his wife had picked it out. His wife was standing a few steps back, small and composed. He looked at me the way a man looks at another man when he recognizes something. "We've got 2 empty chairs," he said. "You're welcome to join us if you want." I almost said no. I was raised to handle things quietly, to not put your weight on strangers. But there was nothing in his face that looked like pity. It was just a straightforward offer from one person to another. "Okay," I said, "thank you." His wife's name was Gloria. She had been a nurse for 28 years. Earl had been a high school principal before he retired. They had 3 adult kids scattered around the country and a house in Park Hill that got too quiet on holidays. We sat together for almost 3 hours. I told them about the phone call, about Neil, about Kayla. I had not planned to say any of it, but something about the way they listened made it easy. Earl didn't offer advice. He just said, "That's a hard thing to go through," and somehow that was the right answer. When the check came, he paid for my meal. Gloria wrote their address on a paper napkin and told me they did Sunday dinner every week, and I was welcome any time. I told myself I probably wouldn't go. The following Sunday, I drove to Park Hill and rang the doorbell. Their house was full in the way houses get when people have actually lived in them. Books on every shelf, photographs covering the hallway wall, something in the oven that smelled like it had been cooking all afternoon. Earl put me to work, setting the table before I had even taken my coat off. Their son Cliff was there with his wife Carol and their 2 kids, Patty and Leonard. Patty was 16 and had strong opinions about geology. Leonard was 14 and was currently convinced he wanted to be a chef. By the time Gloria brought out the pot roast, I had already lost a chess game to Leonard and learned more about volcanic rock formations than I had expected to learn that day. I went back the Sunday after that, and the Sunday after that. For the first time since Linda died, I had somewhere to be. That wasn't just the couch and the TV. I did not know yet what was happening at my own company. The first sign was small enough to explain away. A fuel charge on the company card, $340, for a vehicle we didn't own. I mentioned it to Neil at the end of a Monday afternoon when he stopped by my office. He glanced at it and said it was probably a vendor billing error. He would look into it. His tone was the same tone he used when I asked about anything operational now. Patient, slightly too calm, the way you talk to someone you've already decided doesn't need the full picture. I let it go. I told myself I was being suspicious for no reason. 3 weeks later, I found a rent payment on the company account. $1,200 to an LLC called Redfield Property Group. I had never heard of Redfield Property Group. When I searched it, the registered agent address came back to a mail forwarding service in Aurora. I brought it to Neil again. This time he sighed, set down his coffee, and said, "Dad, I've restructured some of the vendor accounts to streamline the overhead. It's all documented. You don't need to go through every line item yourself anymore. That's what I'm here for." That sentence sat with me for a long time afterward. You don't need to go through every line item anymore. It was my company. I had gone through every line item for 30 years. That was not a task I had handed off. That was something he had simply decided I no longer needed to do. I did not say that to him. I nodded and told him to send me the documentation. The documentation never came. Then Phil Norris called me on a Thursday morning in February. Phil had been my warehouse manager for 11 years before he moved on to a logistics company in Colorado Springs. We stayed in loose touch, the kind of contact where you text on birthdays and mean to have lunch more often than you do. He was not a man who called without a reason. "Gary, I still talk to a couple of the guys over there," he said. "I'm hearing things I think you should know about. I can't tell you everything because it's secondhand, but I think you need to sit down with your actual transaction records. Not the summaries Neil sends you, the source files." I thanked him and hung up and sat at my desk for a long time without moving. The thing about receiving information like that is that your brain immediately starts building a case against believing it. Neil is my son. Neil grew up in that shop, used to sweep the floor on Saturdays when he was 10. Neil knows what this business cost me. He wouldn't. I sat with it for 2 days. Then I pulled the source files. It took me most of a weekend to go through 18 months of transactions line by line. By Sunday evening, I had a legal pad with 3 pages of notes, personal meals billed to the company account, fuel charges for a vehicle registered in Kayla's name, the Redfield Property Group payments recurring totaling $14,400, equipment invoices billed to the company and delivered to an address in Lakewood that was not one of our locations. All of it had Neil's approval signature. $47,000 over 18 months. That was my rough count. My retirement sitting in someone else's pocket. I did not call him. I did not go to the office and confront him. Every instinct I had was telling me to pick up the phone and ask him directly what was going on. But I kept coming back to the same thought. If I was wrong, I could apologize. If I was right and I warned him first, he would move the money and I would have nothing. I called Diane Oakes instead. She had been recommended to me by my accountant as someone who handled forensic work, an independent CPA who specialized in small business audits. I met her at a coffee shop near her office in Englewood and laid out what I had found. She was quiet while I talked, taking notes in a small spiral notebook, and when I finished she looked up and said, "Give me 3 weeks and access to your source accounts. I'll tell you exactly what you have." She called me back in 2 weeks. We met at the same coffee shop. She set a 14-page report on the table between us and walked me through it, section by section, in a voice that was completely steady. The way someone talks when they have delivered this kind of news before. The total she had documented was $47,200. She had found 3 payment streams I had missed. She had also found that 2 of the equipment invoices had been backdated, which pushed the conduct from financial mismanagement into something closer to deliberate falsification. I sat with that report in my car for a while before I drove home. Here's what I want to say about that period, because I think it matters. I was not operating on anger. Anger comes fast and loud and makes you do things you can't take back. What I felt was closer to grief, the same low, heavy feeling I had carried for months after Linda died. The understanding that something you loved was gone and was not coming back the way you remembered it. I grieved the version of Neil I had believed in. Then I made a decision. I set a trap. I created an internal invoice for equipment maintenance, $4,800, routed through one of the vendor accounts Neil managed. The work described in the invoice did not exist. I sent it through the normal approval chain and waited. Neil signed off on it within 48 hours. the same way he had signed off on everything else. I printed the approval confirmation and added it to Diane's report. Then I called my attorney, a man named Howard Gill, who had handled my business contracts for 15 years, and I told him I needed to talk about civil fraud. Howard listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, he asked 2 questions, confirmed he had enough to file, and told me the first move was to freeze the company accounts before Neil could initiate any transfers. He said we needed to move before Neil found out what was coming. I told him to move. The Sunday before the filing, I drove to the Grady house for dinner the way I had every week for the past year. Gloria made her lasagna. Leonard had attempted a homemade focaccia that was slightly too dense but which everyone ate without complaint. After dinner, Earl and I sat on the back porch with coffee while the last of the daylight faded out over the neighborhood. I told him what was about to happen. He did not say much. When I finished, he looked out at the yard and said, "You gave him every chance to come clean on his own. I know. Then you're doing the right thing. Even when the right thing is the hardest thing you've ever done." I drove home and did not sleep well. 3 days later, Howard filed the paperwork. Neil found out when the court documents arrived at his door. He called me 20 minutes after the documents arrived. I was at the community center on Colfax, helping a 74-year-old woman named Dorothy figure out how to video chat with her grandkids in Phoenix. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I looked at the screen, saw Neil's name, and put it back in my pocket. Dorothy got her video call working that afternoon. She grabbed both my hands when it connected, and her granddaughter's face appeared on the screen. I told her she was all set and stepped into the hallway and listened to my voicemails. Neil had called 5 times in 40 minutes. The first message was confused. He said there must be some mistake, that the documents didn't make sense, that I needed to call him back right away. The second was louder. He said I was overreacting, that what he had done was standard business restructuring, that I didn't understand modern financial management. The third message was quieter, which was somehow worse. He said, "Dad, whatever you think happened, this is not the way to handle it. This is your family. You're supposed to talk to me first." The fourth message was Kayla. She said I was making a serious mistake and that their attorney would be in touch. The fifth was Neil again, very short. He said, "I hope you know what you're throwing away." I saved all 5 messages and sent them to Howard. I will not pretend the weeks that followed were easy. There is nothing clean about suing your own son. People who have never done it will tell you that you should have tried harder to work it out. That family is family. That money isn't worth it. Those people have not stood in a coffee shop listening to a forensic accountant explain how their child falsified invoices. The math was not ambiguous. The signatures were not forged. Neil had done this deliberately, over 18 months, while sitting across from me at Monday morning check-ins and asking how my weekend was. Howard filed for a freeze on the business accounts first, which went through before Neil's attorney could respond. That was the move that mattered most. It meant nothing could be transferred, sold, or restructured while the case was active. Neil's attorney pushed back hard on the freeze, but the documentation Diane had assembled was detailed enough that the judge let it stand. The civil case took 8 months. During those 8 months, I kept going to Sunday dinner at the Grady house. I want to be honest about why. It was not because I was in a good place emotionally and looking to celebrate. It was because those dinners were the only 3 hours of any given week when I was not thinking about the lawsuit. Earl would put me to work the moment I walked in the door, setting the table or carrying something from the kitchen, and there was something about being useful in a small, immediate way that quieted everything else down. Gloria never asked me how the case was going unless I brought it up first. When I did bring it up, she listened, and then she would say something practical and short and move on. She had a nurse's instinct for when a person needed information and when they just needed to be in a room with other people. About 4 months into the case, Cliff brought over a bottle of good bourbon after dinner, and the 4 of us sat on the back porch until it was fully dark. At some point, Earl said, "You know what I've noticed about you, Gary, since all this started?" I said I didn't know. "You're not different," he said. "Some men, something like this happens, and it changes the way they carry themselves. You're still the same guy who showed up at our door that first Sunday." That's not nothing. I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. But I thought about it for a long time afterward. The settlement came through on a Wednesday in October. Neil was ordered to repay $47,000 in full. He lost his position in the company and all operational authority. The new LLC he and Kayla had set up was dissolved. Howard called me at 11 in the morning to give me the news, and I sat at my desk and looked out the window at the parking lot for about 10 minutes before I called anyone. I called Earl first. He said, "Good. Now you can start breathing again." Kayla left Neil about 6 weeks after the settlement. Phil heard it from one of the warehouse guys and passed it along without much commentary. I did not feel satisfaction about that. Mostly I felt tired in the way you feel tired after something long and draining finally ends. I ran the business myself for 3 more years after the settlement. I brought in an operations manager named Ted Briggs, who had 20 years of print industry experience and no agenda other than doing his job well. The two of us rebuilt the client relationships that had gotten rocky during the legal period, renegotiated 2 vendor contracts that Neil had let go soft, and got the margins back to where they had been before any of this started. In the spring of my 66th year, I sold the business to a regional firm out of Fort Collins. The sale took 5 months to close, and the price was fair. Not spectacular, but fair. I did not need spectacular. I needed to walk away on my own terms, and I did. The night the sale closed, I drove to the Grady house, even though it wasn't Sunday. Gloria opened the door, looked at my face, and said, "Come in, I'll put coffee on." She did not ask any questions. Earl came in from the garage and shook my hand. We sat at the kitchen table and talked about nothing important for an hour, and I drove home feeling like a man who had finished something. I did not hear from Neil for almost 2 years after the settlement. I had stopped expecting to. He called on a Saturday morning in October, about 22 months after the settlement. I almost didn't pick up. The number was his, but we had not spoken since the 5th voicemail, and I had made a kind of peace with the silence. I picked up. He didn't have a speech prepared. I could tell because there were gaps, small pauses where he was choosing words carefully instead of delivering something rehearsed. He said he wanted to talk if I was willing. He said he was not calling to relitigate anything or ask for anything. He just wanted to talk. We met the following Thursday at a diner on South Broadway, a booth in the back, mid-morning when it was quiet. He was already there when I arrived. He looked thinner than I remembered, and older in a way that had nothing to do with age. His hair was shorter. He was drinking black coffee and had his hands wrapped around the mug like he needed something to hold on to. He didn't make excuses. That was the first thing I noticed. He did not walk me through a revised version of events where his intentions had been misunderstood. He said he had convinced himself for a long time that he was protecting the business from a father who was getting older and losing his grip on things. He said he had used that story to justify taking money that was not his, and that somewhere in the process the story had become more real to him than the actual facts. He said Kayla had encouraged it, but that he had let himself be encouraged, and that was on him. He said he knew none of that made it right. I drank my coffee and listened. I did not tell him it was fine, because it was not fine. I did not forgive him in that booth on South Broadway, because forgiveness is not a switch you flip over eggs and toast, but I told him I was glad he had called. And I meant it. We sat there for about an hour and a half. We talked about Linda, his mother, which we had not done in years. He asked about the Gradys, said he had heard me mention them in the voicemails I had never returned. I told him about Earl and Gloria, about the Sunday dinners, about Leonard's cooking and Patty heading off to university. He listened the way you listen when you're hearing about a life you missed. Before we left, he said, "I'm sorry, Dad, not because of the settlement. Because of what I did to you." I nodded. We shook hands in the parking lot, which felt both strange and right. 4 months later, I brought him to Sunday dinner at the Grady house. I want to be honest, I was not certain how it would go. These people had watched me go through the worst of it. They knew what Neil had done. I did not know if they would be warm or guarded or somewhere in between. Earl answered the door and shook Neil's hand like he was any other person coming to dinner. Gloria took his jacket and told him she had heard he liked cooking, because Leonard had mentioned it, and was he any good with garlic bread, because Leonard always burned it on one side. By the time dinner was on the table, Neil was in the kitchen with Leonard debating the correct amount of butter for garlic bread, and the debate was loud and good-natured and completely normal. Carol and Cliff asked him about his work. Gloria asked him about where he was living. Nobody asked him about the lawsuit or the settlement or any of it. Afterward, Neil and I washed dishes together at the sink while the others moved to the living room. We stood there side by side without saying much. At some point, he said, quietly, "These are good people, Dad." "Yeah," I said. "They are. I'm glad you found them." I handed him a dish to dry and didn't say anything else. Some things don't need a response. That was 2 years ago now. We are not back to where we were before any of this happened. I don't think we will ever be exactly back to that place, and I'm not sure we should be. What we have now is more honest. He shows up, I show up. We are building something that has real weight to it because it is not built on assumptions anymore. Earl and Gloria still do Sunday dinner every week. The table is a little more crowded than it used to be. Neil comes when he can. Leonard's garlic bread has improved significantly. Patty is home for summers and still has strong opinions about everything, which I find deeply reassuring. I sold the business, I won the case, I kept the people who mattered. That's the whole story. If you're watching this and you're somewhere in the middle of what I described, maybe you've already seen the signs and you're still talking yourself out of believing them. Or maybe someone you built something for is telling you that you don't understand your own work anymore. I want to say something directly to you. You are not imagining it. Trust what you know. Document everything, say nothing prematurely, and find yourself a lawyer before you find yourself an argument. The men who built things from nothing did not do it by being naive. And you do not have to stay naive now to prove you love someone and find your Sunday dinner. Find the people who want you at the table, not because of what you own or what you can provide, but because the evening is better when you're in it. Those people exist. I found mine on Christmas Eve in a steakhouse, alone at 62, and it changed everything that came after. You've still got time. Use it right.